Thanks to some fantastic writing and outstanding performances, we got attached to our favorite Squid Game characters very quickly. That's what made it hurt so much when the majority of them got eliminated. On the other side of that coin, there were a few deaths in there that brought out the VIP in all of us by being tremendously satisfying. Hi, I'm Caleb from Wicked Binge, and today we'll be ranking the deaths of Squid Game from most justified to most tragic. There were a lot of considerations that went into place when ranking deaths for this list. We want to cover them with you beforehand so you know what you're looking at and what you're getting into. We will be taking into account how much a character deserved to live from both a moral standpoint and an intellectual standpoint. This means how badly we wanted to see them make it and how well they played their respective games. Not one or the other, but a balance of the two. Keeping that in mind, we'll also be looking at how hard their deaths hit audiences. After all, tragic deaths have that staying power whether we like it or not. We also won't be covering all of the deaths in the show one by one. These are just a wide selection of standouts among the hundreds. Finally, and this should go without saying, there is a huge spoiler warning in effect. With all that said, let's get right into it. There are about to be a lot of eliminations. First off are the justified deaths. These are characters who brought their ends upon themselves. Either through poor sportsmanship or bad karma, these are the deaths that aren't exactly keeping us up at night. Starting things off is the most justified death in the show, Jihoons. Hear us out on this one because we know it's going to be a controversial top pick. There are characters who committed worse crimes than Jihoons. If you've seen our Squid Game characters good to evil list, you know we know that. But if you're anything like us over at Wicked Binge, Jihoons was the only character we constantly wanted to see eliminated. Yes, we also hope to see the frontman get overthrown. Since that never happened, Jihoons' death was the cathartic answer to all the bullying he had done during the games. And as we laid out the rules, we're not just looking at moral justification. When it comes to player deaths, we're also looking at how well those players played the game. While Jihoons played it smart and aggressive in other rounds, he made the dumb decision that led to his own demise. Honestly, we're surprised he didn't die sooner over a few of these idiotic missteps. First, he made an enemy out of Han Mi-neo. While that doesn't speak well to his character, we bring it up because it was incredibly stupid. He didn't take her seriously even though he'd already seen how industrious she could be during the games. She saved his life during Honeycomb after all, before they had a relationship. She even warned him herself never to betray her. Instead of keeping her alive during tug of war, which would have been easy enough to do with how many strong men were on their team, he betrayed her and essentially sealed his own fate. He also wasn't smooth about the fact he was cheating, something which he could have gotten him eliminated for leading up to the marbles game if she had chosen to pull the trigger on him sooner. His second mistake was making a big deal about the order that people had to cross the bridge in. We'll cycle back around to player 244's death, but in the moments leading up to it, Jihoons made a big deal about how it was his turn to move next, subsequently riling up the other players. He clearly wasn't thinking that soon they'd be down a few more players and it would be his turn to go first. But his third and final mistake was, of course, trusting Han Mi-neo. After her warning, after betraying her, embarrassing her, and goading her, he trusted her to pass him on the tempered glass. She had literally already told him he was a dead man for what he had done, but he believed she was going to go ahead and die for him.
Did you believe I'd really die so you could go on?
Honestly, in his shoes, we would have been more afraid of her than choosing the wrong stepping stone. For being a terrible person and for making 3 fatal mistakes that resulted in a perfect storm of his elimination, we're calling this the most justified and most poetic death of Squid Game. Following him is Il-nam. His first fake death would have easily been our pick for the most tragic if it actually had happened. But like with so many aspects of the show, the final episode changed everything. Finding out that the lovable player 1 was actually behind the games altered how we saw virtually all of his actions throughout the series. While it's difficult to ever call death by brain tumor justified, we do feel like the tragedy in this scene came more from Jihoon's pain than the loss of the character who had orchestrated that pain. Il-nam's willingness to bring about death and suffering just to feel something is ultimately what places him high on this list. As we promised, we are cycling back around to player 244. His death, while not as satisfying as Jihoon's, was not something that we felt bad about. If he'd been more important as a character, we may have put him above Il-nam, honestly. He wasn't a horrible person, there were worse than him on the show, obviously, and for the most part, he was weak enough that his terrible ideas didn't have much power behind them. He was quick to express his opinions that the team didn't need to be looking out for girls as an example of this. His biggest sin was of course on the bridge during the glass stepping stones. When it's his turn to jump next, he doesn't do it. Instead, he kneels down on the bridge and starts to pray, holding up the people behind him. Rather than to act and try to save himself or sacrifice himself for the people behind him, he prays and decides that he is safe. This results in an unnecessary death of one person who tries to move him along. It's so frustrating to see his look of vindication as he declares that the Lord has saved him as he moves to the next panel. That's probably what made it so satisfying to see him immediately shoved to his death by the player behind him who wasn't going to risk being thrown into the next panel. Next is player 111, aka the Doctor. We don't like being in a position where we have to agree with the front man, but when he executed the Doctor for cheating, we did kind of understand. It was, weirdly enough, a spark of hope to realize that while murder is okay, cheating will not be tolerated. The speech that is given about letting all the players have a fair chance in the games since they don't have one in the real world was the best light that one could possibly paint the games in.
Everyone is equal while they play this game.
Even though we sympathize with the Doctor trying to do what's best to survive a difficult situation, the fact he robbed the games of their most idealistic message was wrong. Whether you agree with his execution or not, it was a punishment for a crime that he very much committed. Here we have a quick little entry about player 278. He's unique on this list because we don't think his death was tragic or justified. Since we do think he brings it upon himself by failing to stick up for himself properly, we put it closer to justified. We were so proud of him when he told Jihoon off and called him a puny little idiot dog, or whatever that insult was supposed to be in the original Korean. We trust neither the dubs nor subs to this point. We just wish he'd had more follow through. He wasn't a good character whose death we mourn, but we do feel he got cheated in the game of marbles, which is what adds any element of tragedy to the death. Well, that and his survival would have eliminated Jihoon around earlier. But why do we think he got cheated? Well, because he won the first game of marbles. We understand that he only technically had 19 marbles, but because they were playing a guessing game based on the number of marbles, and Jihoon only had one left, his victory was all but assured. This is when Jihoon tells the staff it's unfair they're playing a game player 278 is better at. He demands a new game by calling it a fair chance, which ultimately leads the staff member to accept the request. Don't even get us started on why we think that the staff member would have or should have accepted the request for a new game when staff members are clearly established as unhelpful during the games. We do think that the staff interference and selection of a new game once Jihoon had already lost was horribly unfair. The rule said they choose a marble game together, which they did, and play it to the death, which they did not. In that regard, player 278's death was unjust, but in terms of agreeing to the second game or letting Jihoon even request a second game at that particular point, he brought it upon himself. Especially after the speech he made about not being a lackey for Jihoon anymore, to let him get away with this, it was just so easily avoidable. But we digress. Rounding out the tier, we have player 250 and the other red light green light casualties. We do sympathize with him because there is no way he could have known exactly how high the stakes were. But it's hard to feel like he deserved to win when he had been abducted, stripped, given a uniform, signed away his physical rights, and slapped around a bunch leading into the first round. There were ample signs that elimination would not be a laughing matter. And yet he laughed all the way up to his demise. We feel this is also symbolic of the 254 following deaths, especially those who died because their flight instinct was stronger than their survival instinct. From a moral perspective, we're not saying any of these deaths were deserved, but when you look at how hard the other contestants worked to stay alive throughout subsequent rounds, these were the deaths that would have been the easiest to avoid. The second tier is for the unlucky and the self-sacrificing. While some of them, yes, are very tragic, there are also the justification that comes from players who took their death into their own hands. Starting out this tier is player 69. The best thing about him was that he cost VIP4 a lot of money. We put him in this tier with the other self-sacrifices, but we put him low because that sacrifice came too late. Player 69 ends up committing suicide after killing his wife in marbles. The correct time to do that, if he was going to, would have been during the game so that his wife could have carried on in his place. While a self-sacrifice can be a very heroic thing, in this particular instance, it made player 69 seem very selfish instead. And honestly, we understood where Sangwoo's anger was coming from when he confronted 69 about that very topic leading up to the incident. Following him is Hanmi Neo. We've talked at length about her role in Deoksu's demise, and it's been well established that we weren't sad to see Deoksu finally get eliminated. Hanmi Neo's death had the same poetry to it since it was resolving the same situation, but it was more bittersweet. Not only was she an entertaining character that we didn't get to see more of, but she was the victim in this situation right up until she turned the tables. It made her more sympathetic than the man she was killing, and that just doesn't happen often. What also made her sympathetic was the fact that while she was obviously killing Deoksu for personal reasons, she was also saving everyone in line behind him. This was really the only selfish deed in the entire show that really contributed to the greater good for all the other contestants. The fact that she chooses her own death to splendid effect and with so much confidence makes this one of the more uplifting deaths in the show, and in a positive way, justified. Right in the middle, we have player 96. We feel that more than any other character, his death is equal parts justified and tragic. The justification comes from the fact that this is the first game he's taken an active role in. He says as much himself when he pleads with Jihoon to switch numbers with him for the bridge game. He wants the chance to take his life into his own hands for the first and ultimately last time. It took tremendous strength and nerve to make that request once Jihoon had already chosen the number. This was followed by more bravery as he pioneers and becomes the first casualty of the glass stepping stones. Like Hanmi Neo, his actions on the bridge completed his character arc. They represented positive justification as he stepped into the role of a braver man. The tragedy, of course, lies in the fact that he made the wrong decision for his survival. If he hung back, letting Jihoon choose the number for him, he probably would have survived into the final round. His decision to take number 1 ensured his death in round 5. So grab some tissues, they're all going to get sadder from here on out. Following him is player 240, Ji Young. She did for Songbjok what player 69 didn't have the courage to do for his wife. In the heart-wrenching marbles challenge, Ji Young chooses to die so that her partner can live. It was one of the more heartwarming gestures of the show, and her reason for doing it won her endless praise on her good to evil list. From a moral ranking, she was the character who deserved to die the least. From the perspective of playing the game well, however, her sacrifice puts her in this tier. And rounding out this tier is actually Sangwoo. What a fascinating character and one of the show's most surprising deaths. Before this sacrifice, we would have had a tough time deciding where to put Sangwoo on our list. He would likely have fallen somewhere near the middle anyway, because while he was a terrible person for the majority of the series, he was also one of the smartest players of the games. In terms of people who were fighting for their survival, nobody did it as smart or as well as Sangwoo. The fact that he makes this tremendous sacrifice to take him out of the game so that Jihoon can win without killing him was a radical shift in his character, while also highlighting what he valued most. The money came above everything, including himself at the end. What makes his sacrifice the most tragic is that Jihoon didn't want the money. He wanted his friend, and Sangwoo deals irreparable damage to both of them by choosing to go out the way he does. And finally, we make it to our third and final tier, the tragic deaths. These are the characters that we mourn the most and we feel didn't deserve the ending that they got. First up is player 17. We're going to be honest, a lot of the tragedy in this death is less about player 17 and more about Sangwoo revealing his true colors. But putting a pin in all that for a moment, player 17 played the game well. He's only a focus in his final game, Glass Stepping Stones, where he undoubtedly has a huge advantage over the other contestants, but he knows exactly when to use it. Instead of revealing that he can tell the difference between the glass right away, he waits for the players in front of him to clear a path until the end. This actually gets him a lot farther across because once the VIPs realize he can tell the difference, they turn out the lights and the game continues on a more level field. The advantage for everyone would have been taken away if he had revealed his hand too early. While you could argue that he's less deserving morally for letting those in front of him die, he makes a pretty good point. They all have been more than willing to see others die, and we don't think it's fair to expect him to sacrifice himself and his advantage in the game to save people who wouldn't have thought twice about killing him. Following him is player 271. In terms of tragedy alone, this one got quickly overshadowed as the bunk room converted into a battle royale. But player 271, for those of you who don't remember, was the first one to be murdered by Deoksu during the games. He rightly points out that it's unfair that Deoksu is eating a second dinner when there isn't enough left to go around and is subsequently murdered for it. The altercation that the two of them had ended with player 271 being killed and Deoksu facing no consequences. While the death itself was not as tragic as those coming up, it does speak about one of the great unfairnesses of the show. The frontman may speak with conviction about how this place is the one place where players will be given a shot, but at night, they're subjected to the same conditions and prejudices as the real world. Nobody is looking out for them. Even the other staff members point out that the weak are being weeded out regardless of their performance in the challenges. We know people have been waiting for this one. Junho. This death hurt, we're not gonna lie. He made it a lot further than we were expecting, and we were rooting for him the whole time. He went on a suicide mission to save his brother only to find out that his brother was the face of the operation. That was terrible enough, but the fact he chooses to be shot rather than to get the answers he's been seeking really spoke to his strength of character. But if you've seen our good to evil list, you know exactly where this is going, because his death and a lot of the other player deaths could easily have been avoided if he had been smarter in how he approached the problem. This doesn't undo the tragedy of his death, nor does it undo good intentions. But we did say we're going to be looking at how good a character was and how well they played their respective games. While Junho was not a player in the way the rest of them were, he was gambling with his life just as much as anyone. He too had to face challenges, he didn't face them well. He left clues behind as to his presence, he wasn't good at blending in, and he chose not to do any of this with backup or proper equipment. We wanted him to win, we really did, but it's hard to deny that he brought this death upon himself. Now we move to Jihoons Mother. The fact that we saw this coming from a mile away didn't do much to soften the blow. She was a caring person, a devoted mother and grandmother, the provider of the family, and one of the most selfless people on the entire show. She was a good woman, and even though she is the one that makes the decision to leave her condition untreated, it's fear of poverty and a broken system that forced her into the one decision that ultimately kills her. The tragedy of life letting her down over and over, despite the fact that she was trying her best, was truly heartbreaking. The fact that she could have finally taken it easy had she lived another couple days makes this one hurt all the more. And the more we talk about it, the more it hurts. So we're going to move right along to, well, worse. Our penultimate spot for most tragic death goes to our fan favorite, Ali Abdul. We got a bit of criticism on the channel for previous coverage of Ali, so we want to explain this very difficult decision. The top few deaths were all very, very close. We were looking at how good characters were as people and how well they tried to survive. What it came down to was that Ali was tricked by Song-woo. He trusted the wrong person and it was a mistake. Song-woo was a master of manipulation, and the relationship that he had with Ali gave him too many advantages. They'd built up a dynamic where Ali was reliant on the team, especially Song-woo, for information about the games.
All those games are easy to learn, and we'll teach them to you.
Since he came from a different country, he was not as familiar with what they were playing. It was laid out at the beginning of Marbles that Ali had never played before. Song-woo's deception may have seemed obvious for us, but for all Ali knew, there was a precedent for follow-up rounds where winners were hard to choose. We understand the position he was in led him to fall for this trick, and people in the comments have been quick to let us know Ali was not to blame for his death. Fans loved this character, and it's hard to blame them. He was far too pure of a man to be playing the games, and it showed. This was the death that had a lot of us cursing our decision to ever start watching Squid Game and sobbing into our remotes as we clicked play next episode. This one hurt a lot. We want to be very clear. It was not justified in any way, shape, or form, but he did make the mistake that led to his death. It was only one mistake in a string of glowing self-sacrifices and unwavering loyalty, but when it comes down to the games or our ranking of them, it only takes one error to keep you from the top. Speaking of which, our most tragic death was Songbjok. Where do we even start with this one? She may have not been the best character morally speaking in our show, but she was better than most. While she looked out for herself and kept her focus on her own survival, she didn't go out of her way to threaten or sabotage other players and teams. She entered the games to rescue her brother, who was in an orphanage, and her mother, who is still trapped in North Korea. Like all the best characters on the show, her motivations were good. Toward the end, we see her getting to be more open and more selfless. She's honest with Ji-young when it would have been easy to lie or refuse the request to talk. She initiates her final conversation with Jihoon about family, even offering to look out for his mother and daughter if she makes it out and he doesn't. We already knew at that time it was an empty offer, but it was still better than Sangwoo's final request to look out for his mother at the end. One of her last actions is actually to stop Jihoon, who she believes to be a good man, from killing Sangwoo, whom she knows to be a murderer. It could have saved her life, and still, she has no qualms in stopping him. If we were VIPs, we would have bet on her before we understood why we wanted her to win so badly. She played so well. She was fast, she was smart, she knew when she needed help and who she trusted enough to accept that help from. She never let that trust become reliance or dependence. When it started to get rough with her teammates, she knew exactly when to break away and had the courage to do so. And unlike Ali, she didn't make any mistakes. The most unfair injury across any of the games was the fatal shard of glass she took to the abdomen. The previous rounds had set a precedent of winners being safe once they completed their challenge, and to have the bridge explode put all three of them at risk. Only Songbjok paid the price because she was unlucky and closest to the edge, but all three of them could have suffered with this cruel and honestly reckless final for the benefit of the VIPs. It went against the rules and the spirit of the game and ultimately contributed to the most tragic death. It's another one that we see coming from a long way off because we can see how the injury is impacting Songbjok. There's the grimace of pain, there's the blood on the stairs, and there's the shaky steps, and finally the reveal of the wound. It isn't the wound that kills her technically, but it is undoubtedly what led to her death. It was unfair, unjust, and horribly sad. Even Jihoon, who had suffered more personal losses in the game at this point, can't stop himself from sobbing over her body when she sees that Sangwoo had finished the job. Since we've been watching the show mostly through the framing of his character, is it really any surprise that the death that hits him the hardest is the death we chose as our most tragic? And that's been it, our list of Squid Game deaths from most justified to most tragic. Let us know in the comments below which death hit you the hardest and which ones you were secretly rooting for. Oh, and while you're down there, don't forget to like and subscribe for more Squid Game and media content. And as always, stay wicked.